Thank you. Taoiseach, I want to raise with you today probably one of the most immediate and pressing issues that have developed over the last 6 months, and that is that on top of the already critical homeless situation, we're now seeing a new phenomenon of young families finding themselves homeless due to a number of issues. We have a family has been in contact with us who's living in the Beauties Hotel since November, 2 adults and 2 children, because they could not afford the rent increases that were demanded of them from the landlord in November. And they have been on the South Dublin County Council list. They will not get a house for the next 7 years, and they've been advised by South Dublin County Council to look outside of Dublin for affordable rents. We're experiencing constituents more frequent now in the rent assessment scheme, where you're finding that people are finding that the landlord is coming back, selling the home, and they've been advised now to overhold on these leases because they have nowhere to go, and there is nowhere else in Dublin to go because of the rent increases, as it has been factored over the last 3 months in Dublin 8 alone. They've gone up by nearly 10%. It's now about 1,200 to rent a house in Drimna in Dublin 12. Young men found last week or the week before last in the bin, sleeping homeless and nearly killed, and we've had a young lad contacting us twice in the last 3 weeks who's found himself homeless, told to ring at 2 o'clock with emergency services, nowhere, it was all full, 10 o'clock again full, and given the sleeping bag to sleep on the streets. That is what's happening now. More families are on the streets than ever before. Focus have said that the amount of families becoming homeless per month is increasing from 8 to 16, and 5 children a week are finding themselves homeless. And I want to ask you a question, Taoiseach. Are you aware of this? Are you aware of this trend? Some of your backbenchers have raised it from Kildare in questions. Are you aware of this, and what are the government doing to remedy this? The real issue here is that in 2008, 1.4 billion allocation was given to housing expenditure. In 2012 and 2013 and 2014, that was reduced to 300 million. That's a decrease of 80% for social housing expenditure nationally. And the dependency of previous governments on private developers to build social housing, and the dependence on private landlords to provide social housing is coming home to roost. It's not there anymore. So, Taoiseach, what has been done about this? Is there a need for an immediate response to this by setting up an emergency conference to deal with this issue? And we know what the needs are: 90,000 families needing homes. So we know what the need is. So why aren't we providing that need then?
Thank you, Deputy Taoiseach.
Well, the point you raise has been raised with me and with the government by a number of different deputies from all the different parties, I might say. I was down in Merchants Quay some time ago with Deputy Catherine Byrne and met some of the homeless community. And I do understand the pressure that they're under. You're well aware, Deputy Collins, that we're building nearly 100,000 houses in Ireland in the so-called Tiger years, when we needed 25 to 30. We're now in a position of 7,000 or 8,000 being provided when you need 25, 30. The point you raise is true. Not just people who are single, who are on the streets because of one problem or another, but families. And there's also the pressure on families who are not homeless, who are cooped up in apartments and they want to get out to detached homes. This is part of the discussion the government is having in respect of the construction sector, which is now too small, is not contributing either to the economy or to employment, and needs to be rectified. But the problem is, how do you deal now with the units that are derelict, that should be renovated, with the provision of adequate units for homeless people and homeless families? I want you to know that Minister O'Sullivan is dealing with this. Recently had approval for the cross-departmental group dealing with homelessness. As you know, it's a government priority and part of the programme for government, and that long-term homelessness should be eliminated by the end of 2015. Not much time left there. So it does require a deal of concentration, Deputy Collins. I agree with that. So it's my intention over the next period to actually call in the agencies myself, along with the Minister, to see what the programme is. I recall seeing a picture of a homeless man on one of the Irish papers sometime before Christmas, we've been homeless for 10 years. And given the extent of public funding that's going into these agencies, I just don't understand how that can be. We've got to find out the answers to these questions. People are entitled to have a roof over their heads, to have a home that they can call their own, and be able to get on with their lives. Some of these require attention and assistance and support because of a variety of complications, as you are well aware. So your question is a valid question, but I want you to understand that Minister of State is focusing on this and will report to government. I intend, along with her, to meet with the homeless agencies in the near future to see just what the programme is, how we can get to a point where City Council here in Dublin can assist with vacant and dilapidated and decrepit buildings, what the provision of social housing is going to be, and what are the figures for providing and for families who are homeless and obviously caught in the trap of pressure and demand, where rents are increasing all over Dublin now, and many of them are causing serious pressure for some of these families.
Mouth, Deputy Collins, further 1 minute.
Taoiseach, we know what the needs are. 90,000 families are on the waiting list nationally. Okay, in Dublin alone, there's 16,100. That's about 170,000 individuals are on the waiting list. That's the population of Wexford and Leitrim. This is not a question of discussing or waiting until a month's time and having a meeting, or in 3 weeks' time having a meeting. This needs to be addressed now. We know what the needs are. We have a crisis situation on our hands for housing. There's been a 60% increase in homeless over the last 3 years, on top of people now who can't afford the rents, who are being not thrown out the RAS, but the RAS is not an option for them. The local authorities can't provide the housing for them. And we have a situation in Kildare with Catherine dealing with issues here, that yesterday the housing officer interviewed 16 families, couldn't take on the extra people who needed to speak to the homeless agent. One family approached Catherine having split up due to nowhere to go. The father is currently sleeping on a couch in a situation where his life has already been threatened. He cannot leave. The mother and the 9-year-old boy is staying with a friend. The mother has fallen ill. There are so many situations happening out there. This needs an immediate emergency response to. So that's to be put on a war footing, Taoiseach. Not something to be discussed down the line, a war footing. And we want to hear that from you today. And people out there that are experiencing being homeless, which hopefully none of us will ever see, even though we're nearly a week away from it for an awful lot of people. We want to see action on this, an emergency approach to it. It's not good enough to say discussion has been taking place over a period of time. And just to say that Amnesty have said this is a human right.
Final reply, Taoiseach.
Yeah, but like Deputy Collins, it's wonderful to point out that there are 90,000 people on the housing list. We know that. But you want an immediate response now. You want an immediate response now. I'm sure you do understand that Dublin City Council or any other local authority can't just move in on a site tomorrow and say we're building X number of houses here. Things don't work like that in reality. So this has been a fuse that's been burning now for quite a number of years, and this government are left to clean up another mess here. The fact that there are 90,000 people, out there, we recognise that the construction sector. We recognise that the construction sector. No, thank you, Deputy Cowan, for your comments. Thank you, Deputy Cowan. The fact of the matter is, there are 90,000 people now on the housing list. They need housing. They need housing accommodation. Every deputy in here knows well the pressure, particularly in greater urban areas, for families to be able to move out of apartments that are too small to detached homes. Now, you started off by talking about homelessness, and then you mentioned 90,000 people. Now, don't get them confused in that there's a pressure on the construction sector and pressure on for housing. But, Deputy Collins, we're going to have your full debate here on housing shortly. I'd like to hear your proposition that is going to bring an immediate response here. As we know from the homeless agencies, the people who are homeless, we know the support that's been given to them. We know the support that's been given to them financially. But you can't just put them into prefab buildings here, there and everywhere. There's a process to be gone through. No, if you don't want to hear the truth, well then don't listen to it. There's a process to be gone through. There's a process to be gone through to provide proper housing accommodation for people who need it. And that means blocks and concrete and bricks and mortar. And that means that you put in place the process to know what it is you must provide and go through the proper channels to get your permission and all of that.